Meadowland Media Group presents Conversations with the Candidates.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Dan Santella. Two candidates are vying for the Republican nomination for governor in South Dakota in the July 28th runoff election. Businessman Toby Doeden and current Governor Larry Rhoden. Over the next hour, we'll bring you one-on-one conversations with both candidates, from property taxes to education funding. We're covering a variety of topics that impact people across the state. We'll talk to the candidates in the order they appear on the ballot. And as such, we begin with Mr. Doeden. Thank you for joining us. During our debate in late March, you were here. You suggested a way to help eliminate property taxes, and here's what you shared with us.
If we simply take our state spending and our state budget back to 2023 and 2024 levels, we have enough money to, yes, phase out property taxes, eliminate grocery taxes, and for the first time in 2 decades, make South Dakota affordable for everyone.
And we wanted to dig a little deeper into your plan. My colleague Bob Mercer ran the numbers earlier this year, found that returning state government to the 2023 spending level would have generated roughly $316 million of savings this year. Property taxes alone account for $1.8 billion, $1.9 billion. So where do you find that extra $1.4 billion to afford the elimination of property taxes?
The biggest misconception about my affordability plan, and specifically property taxes, largely because my campaign didn't get a lot of media attention the first 12 months. We're getting more now, but we have this compressed time frame. I did 200 bus stop events, Dan, and I have talked about this publicly literally hundreds of times. I think property taxes are unfair and unjust, and the overwhelming majority of voters in this state happen to agree with me on that, right? So how do we start phasing out property taxes? Mm-hmm. The fear-mongering that started with some of my opponents a year ago said Toby's going to eliminate $1.8 billion in property taxes. If I said I was going to build the biggest grocery store chain in the country, I wouldn't build 5,000 grocery stores tomorrow, Dan. I would build one at a time. So where are we going to start with the phase-outs, right? That's how we deal with a big issue. Okay, we can't eliminate $1.8 billion worth of property taxes overnight. Anybody that would suggest I ever said that is just flat out lying. Okay, so let's just get that misnomer out of the way. So what I want to do is massive property tax reform, all right? So on day one, I meet with all 105 legislators, I meet with all the county leaders, and we say we are taxing people out of their homes, quite literally. Fixed income seniors have had to sell their homes because of property taxes. Young men and women can't afford to buy their first home. And now even middle class is struggling to pay their property tax, right? So most people acknowledge, I think almost everybody acknowledges we have a problem, all right? I want to start with owner-occupied property taxes, right? These are the fixed income seniors. These are the middle class folks that are struggling, right? That's where we need to start. So now we're talking about 700 million, give or take, right, rather than 1.8 billion, okay?
The number I pulled earlier today in 2024, owner-occupied homes and mobile homes, about 790 million in 2024.
Yeah. So we start there, and then we probably segment it down even more. Well, let's start with fixed income seniors. Let's start with veterans, the people that have given so much to this country, so much to our state. Now we're less than $100 million, right? So when you look at $100 million in the first year or two versus a $7.7 billion state budget, it looks very reasonable. And again, I have talked about this plan reasonably hundreds of times. Sadly, it wasn't covered by the media. And then, you know, all the big donors, they were spreading all of this nonsense. Toby's going to defund the police and defund the teachers and all this. Complete and utter falsehoods, right? So on day one, I am going to lead the push to, over the next period of years, starting with my first 4 years, reforming property taxes to make the system more fair and more just for the residents that live here, so the folks that own homes can afford to keep them, and the youngsters that want to buy their first home can afford to buy their first home. That is my priority.
So then is it goal to eliminate property taxes on owner-occupied homes eventually over 4 years, eventually over 8 years? Is that the goal?
The goal would be to do it as quick as possible, but it has to be done responsibly and reasonably. So as we earmark new money, we use that new earmarked money to phase out that much property tax, right? If we can do $100 million a year, great. If we can do $300 million in year 2, $200 million in year 3, the point is, let's start getting the ball moving in a more fair and more just direction, right? I just don't know who decided, Dan, and I don't know when it was decided, that a 65-year-old retiree in South Dakota who owns their home, hasn't had a mortgage in years, is on a fixed income, Social Security, and their Social Security increases a couple percent a year, but property tax doubles and they have to sell their home. I just don't buy into that being fair. I don't. And I will fight every day to stop that from happening. And I'm telling you this much, and the people around the state know this, the politicians are ignoring this issue. They don't even acknowledge that hundreds, it might be more than 1,000, but I know at least hundreds, I've met them, have already sold their homes because of property tax, right? It's very sad.
How about property taxes on ag land?
Listen, if I could wave a magic wand and get a wish, I would eliminate all property tax tomorrow. Yes, of course I would love to, right? I don't think farmers and ranchers should be paying tax on their land either. But again, we have to start somewhere.
So it's a gradual process.
It's a gradual process. Listen, people are just so impatient these days, right? So you start with the people that are struggling the most. Listen, I don't know, does it take 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? The point is, somebody has to have enough gumption and a strong enough backbone to actually stand up against the system and say, this simply isn't fair. We are going to start the process of reversing these unfair property taxes, right? I have said that over and over. I will fight every day as governor to do that.
You mentioned a moment ago that maybe in year 1, it's 100 million saved, 200 million saved, what have you. Okay, where do we make up that money? Specifically, where does that come from?
Number one, we're going to find more than $100 million in wasteful spending when my Department of Government Efficiency starts doing targeted audits, department by department.
Where's that going to be found, you think?
The nature of audits, Dan, is we don't know where we're going to find it. If I knew exactly where it was, I wouldn't need to do an audit. I would just go find it and save the money, right?
How do we know we're going to find it then?
Do you think our state government is 100% efficient?
I'm not running for office.
Okay.
You know?
There's no reasonable person that has ever existed on this planet that thinks government is 100% efficient, okay? They found $19 billion in fraud with an internet influencer started sneaking around, right? Look at all the fraud they found in DC. I mean, government is overrun with waste, inefficiencies, redundancies. Whatever the number is, we're going to find it, and it's 100% more than we found. So that's number one,
okay.
Right? We are going to prove. Shouldn't we prove to the taxpayers that we are spending their money as efficiently as possible? Our state government has never done audits. Why? Every private company does audits. I do audits in all of my companies.
I imagine yours do.
Yeah. Every year. And guess what? I run lean companies, and we still find waste and inefficiencies every time I do an audit. We're going to find a lot of money, I promise you. Whatever that number is, it's going back to the taxpayers. Number two, our economy is on life support. Did you see the latest report, Q1 2026?
I did. South Dakota did poorly on GDP that quarter. However, in the last quarter of 2025, I believe we were second best, and also did well in the third quarter of 2025.
You have to look at the whole picture.
And
our GDP is retracting, okay? And our sales tax revenue in 2023, 2024, and 2025 was the same. Right? We didn't take in any more sales tax revenue in 2025 than we did in 2023. That is a stagnant economy. So what did our spending do under Governor Rhoden? Right? 38% our state spending has increased between 2023 and 2025. Right? We have to grow the economy. We don't need new taxes. We don't need higher taxes. We need more tax revenue. Our tax base needs to widen. The only way we're widening the tax base and generating hundreds of millions in more sales tax revenue is to grow the economy, right? Our economy is on life support. Our small businesses are closing at the fastest rate ever. 10,000 small businesses in the state have closed since 2020. We have to find ways to roll back regulation, find easier pathways to lending. SBA is not coming through. GoEd is not helping small businesses in this state. They're just not, I'm sorry. And hundreds and probably thousands of small and medium companies are flocking left, liberal, unfriendly business states every year. We're not getting nearly enough of them. One of my priorities as governor with the economy is to proactively, me personally, I want to go out, find, attract, recruit, and bring new small and medium companies to this state.
I think that's probably a good place to pause. We've got a lot more questions to come. Good conversation has already started. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's get to education. Here's a question from Heath Larson with the Associated School Boards of South Dakota.
Describe how you will support K-12 public education in South Dakota.
How do you respond?
Sadly, if you look at just about any metric, our K through 12 education has taken a step backwards in the last 20 years. I don't say that to be negative, but as a leader, when we see positive things, we should pat people on the back. But when we see negative things, we have to be able to stand up and say it, right? I've been criticized for saying that, but it's true. About half of our grade schoolers today aren't reading and writing at their grade level. I think that's a big issue. I think educating the next generation of our youth is the most important thing as a leader in this state, right? So when you look at their budget, and again, I'm a big budget guy because all good and all bad usually comes from too much funding, not enough funding, the funding's not going in the right area. $2.1 billion roughly the state spends on education. That budget has increased pretty rapidly the last 10 and 15 years. And when you look at the numbers, a lion's share of it, I don't believe has gone to the right places. It's largely gone to the bureaucrats, lobbyists, people in peer, more of the oversight. And not nearly enough of it has gone to the rural schools, maybe into more effective curriculum. I know there's been a lot of controversy about that. And then our teachers are still paid 47th out of 50, right? Which I think is very unfortunate. So we got to put the power back in the hands of mom, dad, the teachers, right? Invest back into our rural communities, back into the people that need the money. And I think that's largely what I'm going to fight for as governor. Make sure the money that we're spending is actually going to the people and places that need it the most. And I think at the top of that list is education.
Okay. Eric Ali, Executive Director of the South Dakota State Employee Organization, has this question regarding the state's 14,000 state workers.
State employees want to know, how are you going to take care of them? What are you going to do for them in their careers and their livelihoods as career public servants in South Dakota?
What do you say?
A little hard to hear there, but I think I got it.
As I grabbed it, to what are you going to do, help take care of and assist and partner with the state's 14,000 state employees?
Listen, we have amazing employees. I've had hundreds of employees that have came to my bus stop events, and oftentimes they stay after and they talk shop with me. A lot of them are frustrated. They're not getting large enough pay raises. Some years there's pay freezes, right? We have this inflation going up, and a lot of the employees, the people that are doing the work, that are fixing the roads, that are keeping us safe, that, boots on the ground. Now you look at some of the administrators and the bureaucrats in peer, we've seen massive pay increases. Their pay has doubled in a very short time period. And we have more and more layers of managers and leadership positions in peer. So what I've seen, and this is the feedback, this isn't just Toby saying this,
from the bus stops.
From the bus stops, lots of state employees, again, these are boots on the ground employees, they're not getting the pay raises, they're not getting all the recognition. The money and the recognition is going to the people in peer, and they're sick and tired of it. I'm going to fight for every single state worker to get them a fair pay raise every year so they can afford to keep up with inflation, so they can have an affordable life with their families. What I am not going to tolerate is massive amounts of bureaucracy, too many layers of high-paid six-figure jobs in peer. Those are the people that should probably be worried under the Doeden administration. So I'm going to walk in on day one and say, what do you do all day? What do you do? What do you do? I know what the people out there, the 13,500 that are out actually working, running this state, fixing our potholes, moving snow, doing all the road work. I know what they're doing. They're keeping us safe, right? And they're not getting pay raises. So I promise you, I win this race, Dan, within a year or two. The 13,000 or 13,500 state employees are going to absolutely love me as their governor.
This is a good pausing point. Stay with us. We'll have more questions coming up. Welcome back. When it comes to policy, is there an area with which you disagree with President Donald Trump?
I mean, my focus is clearly on South Dakota. Admittedly, I don't keep up on all of the happenings of the federal government, especially the last 13 months. I've been a little preoccupied. I supported President Trump because President Trump vowed to put our country first and the people of our country ahead of people around the world, including illegal immigrants that have, come across our southern border. I'm not alone in that. I think most Americans that I know that supported Trump, or at least are happy he won, was because of what was happening at the southern border. South Dakota has felt it. I have talked to a lot of law enforcement, and they are not only convinced, they're sure there's cartel activity. Some of that has come from an open border policy. So, no, I mean, listen, he puts America first. He fights for closed borders. Look at the economy. Stock market's all-time high. Inflation is as low as it's been in years. Like, at the end of the day, the people that live in America, that follow the law, they want an affordable life. They want strong law and order and great education and a good infrastructure. Donald Trump is delivering all of those for this country.
Do you think the best thing he's done for South Dakota has been his work along the southern border then?
I think you can say that for all 50 states. Protecting our borders from illegal immigrants, some of which are criminals, violent criminals, rapists, murderers, etc.
A minority.
A vast majority. But even the ones that are here are still sucking money out of our system through Medicaid and other plans. I mean, you've seen it. Cell phones, hotels, airfare. When South Dakotans can't afford to pay their property tax, it's hard to feel badly for illegals that come here and are taking revenue away from them that we could be using to phase out their property tax. On day one as governor, I'm going to ramp up the deportations in South Dakota. If you are here illegally, the Doeden administration is going to look for you, we're going to find you, and we are going to deport you. And that includes our state prison. We still have a ton of illegal criminal aliens in our state prison system. Larry Rhoden said that he deported them. He didn't. He deported a couple. I'm deporting all of them immediately.
You've given nicknames to your opponent. So has our 47th president. Is that an attempt to be like President Trump? Why the nicknames?
Well, I mean, when you forget things, the first debate, he was standing right where you're sitting there in the first debate. He couldn't remember any of his lines, even though he brought notes in, which were illegal. He did the same thing in the other two debates. He brought in illegal notes, and he tried to read them, but he couldn't. He forgot a lot of the things he was going to say.
I don't believe he had notes at the debate.
Well, he did. And he forgot a lot of things he was going to say. Joe Biden forgot a lot of the things he was trying to say in the debate with Donald Trump. So listen, comparing him cognitively during the debates to Joe Biden is very, very fair. And I think we have to question who's actually running our state government. Because somebody that's unwilling to stand in front of a camera for 60 minutes as an adult to debate and have public discourse against their opponent, in my opinion, is not fit for office.
We recently took a walk in a very warm downtown Sioux Falls to ask different people what they would ask candidates if they had the opportunity to. One of the people I met told me about mental health.
I'd love to hear from whoever our next governor is on what their plans are to continue to support our rural communities and even our big cities when it comes to mental health.
We need more money. We need more centers. We need all of this stuff, right? These things are being defunded, by the way. Many people at my bus stops have mentioned, some of them run non-profit, right, facilities for mental treatment. And they continue to get defunded more and more and more.
Is some of that defunding coming from the federal government?
It's federal and state government. But the point being is, when state agencies, any government at any level, I don't care if it's city, county, state, or federal, when they don't have the funds, everybody gets negatively impacted. It's why it's so important that we elect a pro-business governor who's going to do massive economic projects in the state. We're going to revitalize our economy. We're going to grow our existing 70,000 small businesses. We're going to have massive increase in tax base revenue. Then we'll have the money to go help with issues, not just mental issues, but rehabilitation for nonviolent drug offenders, our infrastructure, rural health care, right? All the things, the rising drug epidemic. There are a lot of things we're starting to kind of fall behind on, Dan. And it takes a massive amount of money to effectively attack and improve these. Right now, our state doesn't have any money because our economy is flat. I look forward to being the governor that can turn that around.
We're going to take another quick break. We'll be back with more questions shortly. Welcome back. We've talked to some voters who have changed their party registrations in order to vote in the runoff. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, some of it's natural. If you look back at other cycles, there's always some that switch. We have a lot of independents in South Dakota, right? So I think some of it's sad. But sadly, there has been this organized push, depending on who you talk to. Some people think it originated from some of the people on Larry Rhoden's team. I hope that's not true. But to get Democrats to go register as Republican to vote for Larry, because they clearly the Democrats want Larry to win. They see him as a far more left-leaning candidate, so they can get more progressive things perhaps done in the state, data centers and, maybe even recreational cannabis and some other things. I'm a conservative guy. I've spoken against some of the far left radicals. And I say far left because the majority of the Democrats I've met are reasonable people. We just don't agree on all the issues. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of friends that are Democrats. I have people that I'm partners, people that I work with, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's true, it's very sad. It sounds like, election fraudish, which, is never a good thing. And I will continue to be optimistic and positive. I hope that's not the case, but we will find out soon enough.
A lot of information out there. You and I have chatted several times, and there's no lack of information on the candidates. What is your message, nevertheless, to an undecided voter? Still doesn't know what direction they're going to go on July 28th.
I think if you just zoom out, Dan, don't look at one issue or this issue, and just say who has the best vision for the future of South Dakota. And there are two very separate visions. Larry believes in inevitable decline. The government just gets bigger, taxes go up, things get less affordable. We're never going to get back to where we were. That's kind of the mindset of kind of the bureaucratic political class. I don't buy into that. I believe our best days are ahead in South Dakota. I believe we can make South Dakota safer, more affordable, more prosperous. I'm a very optimistic, forward-thinking, positive person. I just don't buy into inevitable decline. So if you think we're just doing the best we can and we can't improve in these key areas, then you should vote for Larry. If you want more affordability, if you want strong law and order, if you want your kids to be safe, if you want great education, if you want hope and prosperity and somebody that's going to fight every day for the people of this state, not the rich, not the powerful, then you should vote for me.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me here. Really appreciate it. We're going to sit down with current Governor Larry Rhoden next. But before we head to the break, we will let you know about our election page on KLAN.com. We got key election dates. We have candidate information. All you need to know at your local election headquarters. Of course, also their live coverage for you on election night, July 28th. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We continue our conversations with the Republican candidates seeking their party's nomination for South Dakota governor. The winner of the runoff will face against Democrat Dan Allers in the general election on November 3rd. We're talking to the Republican candidates in the order that they appear on the July 28th runoff ballot. You just heard from Toby Doeden. Now we're joined by incumbent Larry Rhoden. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
One issue that's been dominating the conversation this election season is property taxes. You've touted the state's new property tax law as the largest property tax cut in state history. So how do you respond to critics who might call this a tax shift?
Well, we're using, it's a two-part plan, the reduction. First of all is the local option with a half-cent, the counties can opt for a half-cent sales tax, which would go to a property tax reduction fund. The other half of the equation is statewide relief, and that uses the 0.3% of sales tax that's going back on this year. And so that's not a tax shift. That was slated when the legislature reduced that tax. They had a sunset provision that put it back on. Legislators were already talking about how they were going to spend those dollars, and that was what the trigger for me to say, if they're going to spend it, why not give those dollars back to the property taxpayers of South Dakota? So that's what it does, and that's represents roughly half of the tax relief. So one is a local option. They make the decision whether or not they want to implement a half-cent sales tax. The other one's automatic.
Gotcha, because right now it's 4.2%, next
Yep.
summer to 4.5%.
4.5%. That represents $114 million annually, which will be given back in the form of reducing the mill levy for the homeowners.
If there's one phrase that maybe has dominated this election cycle, at least the gubernatorial cycle, it might be property taxes, right? We've heard it talked about by different candidates and different platforms. Do you think that that issue has overshadowed other topics in this race?
Well, yeah, in a lot of ways. I never dreamed there would be so much discussion just solely about property taxes. And I think, of course, a big part of that is the opponents' broad comments about just repealing property taxes altogether. And so I think that's probably why it got to be a bigger and bigger issue. And then prior to the primary, other opponents of mine trying to belittle that by suggesting that it's just a tax shift.
And then, so what issues may have been overshadowed, do you believe?
Well, just our economy and the strength of our state. There was a lot of talk by my opponent about saving South Dakota, and it was interesting when there were a four-way primary, because my three opponents were put in a position where they were trying to convince the citizenry that we needed to be saved, that we're in terrible shape. And I rather enjoyed that, because it gave me a chance to talk about the reality of where we're at in South Dakota and how well we're doing. And my optimism about the future of South Dakota based on where we're at now and the steps we've taken and my vision for South Dakota.
A recent attack ad by your campaign, or an ad, says that Doeden's plan to replace property taxes would be to increase sales taxes. Now, that is what legislation you signed this year would do, right? To raise the sales taxes, correct?
No. On the property tax relief?
Right, like SB 96, to allow counties
that
to...
That portion would be the county's option. Each county could decide whether or not they wanted to use the half-cent sales tax to provide property tax relief.
And HB 1245, I believe, gives cities the option of imposing a 1% sales tax.
No, not at all. It is automatically reduces the mill levy for the education portion of the property taxes by 1.67 mills, or $1.67 per $1,000 of valuation. That's automatic, and that happens statewide.
And then how does that compare, as you see it, to Toby Doeden's plan?
Well, that's it. That's the problem. Toby Doeden doesn't have a plan. He says he has a plan, but we've been waiting and waiting to hear what that plan is. He says, my plan will do this, and my plan will do that. Well, what's the plan? And that's the nature of the commercials that we put out now, is in order to raise the kind of revenue that he's suggesting is going to be lost by repealing property taxes altogether, which is what he had been stating all along, was repealing property tax. In order to find that kind of revenue, there's only two choices. You double, it would represent more than doubling our sales tax, or a statewide income tax.
In sort of a similar vein, in economic development, how can the state help businesses who might be struggling to hire the workers that they need?
Well, we're taking steps right now to help that. Workforce shortage has been a problem nationwide, and we've come a long way in South Dakota through our program for tech ed and our scholarship programs, Build Dakota Scholarship, and putting more focus and emphasis on the value of technical training in South Dakota, and through our apprenticeship programs to allow professionals. We've expanded and addressed, starting to address our teacher shortage problem in different career fields by encouraging our young people to stay right here in South Dakota, expanding our opportunities for them to stay in South Dakota and the pay grade. And so a lot of things have been happening to address the workforce shortage in South Dakota.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break here. We have a number of questions when we come back. Welcome back to our conversation with Republican gubernatorial candidate Larry Rhoden. In recent history, South Dakota teachers have been paid amongst the worst in the country, not a new development. Mr. Rhoden, earlier in our debate with all four candidates, you said this.
In South Dakota, we don't spend what we don't have. And we had a tough budget year this year. But with the 1.4% increase that we ended up with, that still put us, if you take the last 6 years, it put us like 7.5% ahead of where we would have been had we just followed the law.
So can you explain what you meant by that, looking at those numbers?
Yeah, so the state law for education funding is we give the school districts 3% or CPI, whichever is less. And so there were years in the last 6 years under the Rhoden administration, and now the last 2 sessions under the Rhoden-Van Huysen administration. In the last 2 years, we had some pretty tight budget years, and so last year we were less than what the law would dictate. But if you averaged all 6 years, you total them all up, and those years we were doing very well after COVID, we actually in some cases doubled what the law required, because we were catching teachers up or education funding, and so the cumulative total is we are 7.5% of where we would have been over those past 6 years.
Taking a longer view rather than just the 1 year.
And I would also state, as an aside to that, is we just released the budget numbers for year end, and we're doing substantially better this year. So we're getting back on track. I think we got past the hangover, and things are tracking very well budget-wise.
Now, 69 million in surplus?
It's 69 million in surplus. About 30 million of that was reversions from schools, and our sales tax revenues were up about 6.6% year over year.
Public school teachers fall into what's known as the big three, of course: education, state employees, and then state healthcare providers. We saw last December a recommendation of 0.0%. Is there a possibility for another 0% recommended increase for the big three as we saw last December?
I don't believe so. I'm a lot more optimistic of that. And a reminder there, that's where we started out.
Right.
As the numbers improved, we went to 1.4%. But one key component in that was the fact that we started the year, our budget, we were $54 million increase in ongoing revenue. But what happened is we got $50 million of additional costs shifted down from the feds onto the state in the form of Medicaid funding. The FMAP increased what our percentage was, and the SNAP benefits both worked against us, and it basically erased all the revenue that we had increased by growing our economy.
Okay.
This year, we won't be facing that.
Okay. We have another question from the leader of the Associated School Boards of South Dakota. Here's
Describe how you will support K-12 public education in South Dakota.
What do you say?
Well, we've already talked about some of the ways, in years past when I was in the legislature, people would talk about education being the last in line to gain increases, and I always disputed that, because the fact of the matter is they're the first in consideration as far as our budget, because roughly half of our budget goes to education, and so they would do that as a starting point, and then at the end of session, if there was extra dollars rolling around, we would invest those in education. The other point I wanted to make is it was about 3 years ago. We just talked about it earlier today with Lieutenant Governor, because I think he carried the legislation 3 years ago. We were dead last in teacher pay. Well, when we added the additional half-cent sales tax years ago, the majority of that went to education. But what was happening, the legislators provide the funding per pupil. The school districts decide how much of that goes to who.
Sure.
And how much of it is dedicated to teacher salary. What we saw was a lot of those dollars weren't going to the teachers. So we passed legislation about 3 years ago to fix that. If the school district gets 3%, the teachers should get a 3% increase.
Another question coming in from Eric Alia, Executive Director of South Dakota State Employee Organization. He has this regarding the state's 14,000 state workers.
State employees want to know, how are you going to take care of them? What are you going to do for them in their careers and their livelihoods as career public servants in South Dakota?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we talked about the big three. That's something relatively new, and I think it's kind of evolved that way, because we always, when I was a legislator way back in the day, we always had a segregated fight between education and healthcare workers and state employees. And more through the years, we've found out that it's just a lot easier for the process, and I think a lot fairer to put them in the same boat. Then we weren't each year trying to create winners and losers. If we give 3% to healthcare or to education, we're going to treat the state employees the same way, and healthcare workers, and it's worked pretty well. And I fully intend to continue working in that with those parameters.
All right.
The big three.
Thank you. Another quick break. More questions coming after that. When it comes to policy, is there an area with which you would say you certainly disagree with President Donald Trump?
Well, I'm trying to think of, we have so much federal policy and state policy, and I'm trying to think of where they overlap. But I don't think of anything immediately that comes to mind that I disagree policy-wise with President Trump. I think he's done a good job overall, and I know there's a lot of criticism about different nuances to his administration, but I tend to try to remain focused on South Dakota. There's plenty of things I can worry about in South Dakota, and it's where I can really sink my teeth into. I have the ability and the position to make change and to carry visions forward for our state, and that's going to continue to be my focus.
When Governor Kristi Noem is in office, relations with tribal leadership at time could be strained. How have you sought, I haven't seen you have meetings with tribal leadership, and how will you continue to seek to work with South Dakota's native nations?
Yeah, well, that's been an interesting development for me, because I really didn't know what to expect taking the reins, and I don't know if it's just happenstance, but we've got a great relationship, and sometimes I think maybe Governor Noem tried too hard, and You know, I grew up in an area where I had more contact with tribal members. My roommate in high school was a tribal member, and I don't know, I think maybe I just understand them a little better.
Because you grew up near the Cheyenne River Reservation.
Yeah, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. And so when I took the reins, I took more of a hands-off approach. You know, we talked about, you know, we'd meet them halfway if there were problems that arose, and if they wanted to meet with us, we'd be more than happy to do that. And we kind of just left that open-ended, and we've had a lot of good results that way, and good communication. Even on times that we've disagreed, we were able to talk through it, and I was pretty palms up and plain spoken with them, even on the fireworks at Mount Rushmore. Obviously, we had disagreement there, but we talked through that, told them what my position was and that it wasn't going to change, and they were very gracious and understanding, and never made much of a fuss about it.
All right. I recently took a walk in downtown Sioux Falls. I talked to different people about what they would ask you and Mr. Doeden if they had a chance to ask you questions. During those conversations, the topic of mental health came up.
I'd love to hear from whoever our next governor is on what their plans are to continue to support our rural communities and even our big cities when it comes to mental health.
Well, you know, the answer I would give to that is we have a huge opportunity facing us in South Dakota with the rural health transformation dollars. A tremendous amount of potential. When I think we received $189 million this year, we'll get over $500 million in 5 years to be used on issues exactly like that. And that is a big issue for South Dakota. And we have a huge opportunity, and I think we'll be able to really, you know, we were one of the first states to come up with a proposal to submit to the feds on how we would use those dollars, and it was approved. So I'm extremely optimistic about our ability to move the needle in South Dakota on rural, whether it's healthcare or mental illness, all of the above. We have some resources that we can really put some rubber to the road on that.
So many people live not next door to a facility. It's a rural state.
Yeah. And we could talk about it for a long time, but I mean, telehealth in our ambulance systems, it was really kind of the perfect storm. And I would add to that by saying it was a perfect storm for South Dakota because since in the last 3 years, we've invested in infrastructure dollars over $350 million for rural broadband. And so that goes hand in glove with the Rural Health Transformation Act. We wouldn't be allowed to use those dollars to implement high-speed broadband. We've already done that. So we've set the table to really move the needle a long way in a short amount of time.
Stay tuned. We're going to be back with our last set of questions after a quick break. We're back with Republican gubernatorial candidate Larry Rhoden. We've talked to some voters who have changed their party registrations in order to vote in this runoff. What do you think about that?
Well, you know, it's actually been fairly encouraging because I've had a number of people just stop me on the street or in a grocery store and tell me that they switched their registration so they could vote for me. And when you visit with them, you know, their heart's in the right place. You know, they fear for the state, and so they wanted to participate. So, you know, it's encouraging to me, I guess.
There's a lot of information out there. What is your message to an undecided voter?
Well, my message has always been that, you know, the most significant advantage I have over, you know, any of the candidates now with the one is I'm a proven leader. And 2 years ago, 2 sessions ago, I made the commitment that I would operate with the pillars of openness, responsiveness, and civility. And I followed through on that. And it's yielded great results for our state. So I've been doing the job. We've had some tremendous results and some great accomplishments. And that's the vision I'll carry forward to South Dakota. Rather than pie in the sky promises, empty promises, with no real plan, and just trust me, and rhetoric about saving our state. And to me, I think, why would you support something like that?
Do you see your biggest accomplishments in office as that civility, getting the prison across the finish line, economic vitality? Are those among what you see as since you took office?
Certainly, all of the above. And we had a lot of challenges the last session with a very diversified group of legislators. And I've said that I really think the secret sauce was the civility, and working with the legislators, working across the spectrum, and proving that I had the ability to work across the aisles and the political spectrum, even within our party. And I think that goes back to part of the reason that people are switching to cast a vote, because they've seen that, and they like what they've seen, the leadership style of working with all of South Dakota.
This time and other times, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me and sit down with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Be sure to stay with KELOLAND News as we continue to cover this and have the latest election results. Thanks for tuning into Conversations with the Candidates. And if you missed any of the conversation, you can always watch it on demand at any time on KELOLAND Plus. As always, we'll have the very latest for you on air, online, also on social media, and on our streaming services.